My daughter, Lauren, believed her husband, Charlie, was a caring and loving partner. However, I knew he was hiding his true nature, as he would sneak into my bedroom at night while I was supposedly sleeping. He was looking for a way to get my assets. He thought I was just an old man who trusted too easily. But he had no idea I had a surprise waiting for him that would change his life forever. My fork was halfway to my mouth when Charlie interrupted our quiet dinner. He wanted to know about my safe upstairs and what kind of lock it had. Lauren, my daughter, almost choked on her water, startled by his question. But Charlie didn't take his eyes off me, waiting for an answer. There was a cold calculation in his gaze. I carefully put down my fork to buy time to think. He claimed he was just curious about the house's security, mentioning recent break-ins in the neighborhood, which I knew was a lie. I had lived in this neighborhood for over 15 years, and nothing of the sort had ever happened. Charlie dismissed my point, saying that I probably just hadn't heard about it, as such cases are hushed up to avoid panic. He leaned across the table, insisting that a man my age, living alone in such a large house, should have serious security measures in place. Lauren was visibly uncomfortable, and I could see she was trying to protect me. Charlie's voice grew more insistent. He said that if anything ever happened to me, Lauren should know where all my important things were. The room suddenly felt very small. I watched his face, noticing his pupils dilate slightly when he talked about my death and his fingers tap nervously on the table when I didn't immediately answer. Finally, I told him that everything was in order and that Lauren knew everything she needed to know. Then he asked if she knew about the key. Lauren looked at him and then at me, confused, asking what key he was talking about. His smile widened as he mentioned the key that was in my bedroom dresser drawer. I was shocked and asked how he knew that. For a split second, his mask of concern dropped, and I saw a cold, calculating look before he quickly pulled back on his mask of concern. He smoothly explained that he had been looking for an aspirin for a headache last week, and Lauren had told him to check my bathroom, but he had opened the wrong drawer by mistake. Lauren quickly confirmed that she remembered his headache. But I remembered that day too. Charlie had been upstairs for almost half an hour, claiming he was having stomach issues after dinner, which was far too long to be looking for an aspirin. I quietly reminded him that the aspirin was and always is in the medicine cabinet. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly as he insisted that he must have been out of his mind with the pain. The conversation slowly died down, but Charlie kept circling back to the same topic, asking about my bank, who had keys to the house, and about my daily routine. Each question was like a finger poking at a wound, looking for a soft spot. When dinner finally ended, Lauren offered to clean up, but Charlie told her to leave everything to me and for them to go rest. I listened as they went upstairs and the door to their bedroom closed. As I washed the dishes, I went over Charlie's questions again, focusing on how he knew about a key that wasn't supposed to exist and his casual mention of my death and Lauren's inheritance. My hands went through their practiced motions, washing and drying the dishes, while my mind cataloged all the red flags I had ignored over the last 3 weeks. His story about being unemployed never made sense, and his constant interest in my financial situation was unsettling. He had also been studying my house, as if he were memorizing its blueprints. I washed the last glass and hung the towel on the hook. The kitchen was spotless again, but something had fundamentally changed. The house now felt exposed. Muffled voices drifted down from upstairs, and then silence. It was time to see what other surprises my own home held. The first thing I noticed as I went up the stairs was my bedroom door. It was slightly ajar, a 1-inch wide sliver of darkness visible inside. I froze on the stairs, gripping the banister. I always closed that door. It was a habit from 40 years of living alone, only recently broken by my daughter's presence. But Lauren and Charlie were staying in the guest room down the hall, so there was no reason for anyone to be in my room. I stood there for half a minute listening. No sounds came from the guest room, no movement upstairs, just the usual creaks of an old house and the pounding of my own heart. I slowly pushed the door open, waiting for it to creak. Didn't. The hinges were well-oiled and silent. Entering my own private space felt like walking into a crime scene. At first glance, everything looked normal. The bed was made, the comforter was flat, and my reading glasses were on the nightstand where I had left them. But my trained eye, honed by decades of life, immediately noticed inconsistencies. The closet door was open by 1.5 inches. I always closed it completely. The dresser drawers weren't perfectly flush either. The second drawer from the top, where I kept all my important papers, was pushed in carelessly, and the corner of a manila folder peeked out like a yellow tongue. My stomach twisted. I walked over to the dresser and pulled the drawer all the way out. The folders inside were rummaged through and returned to a rough order, but not exact. Someone had been meticulous but not careful enough. Insurance documents were mixed with bank statements. My will, which was usually in the back folder, had been moved to the front. The little brass key I had kept taped to the underside of the drawer lip was gone. I checked twice, running my fingers over the wooden surface where the tape used to be. Nothing. The key to the safe that Charlie had so casually asked about at dinner was gone. My hands started to tremble, but not from fear, from rage. This was not a random act. This was a targeted, systematic violation of my personal space by someone who knew exactly what they were looking for and where to find it. Someone who was sleeping down the hall with my daughter. But Charlie had made one fatal mistake. He assumed I was a naive old fool, too trusting and too tired to notice the small things. He was wrong. I carefully closed the dresser drawer, leaving everything as I had found it. If Charlie thought he had acted in secret, I wanted him to continue to think so. Let him believe his intrusion had gone unnoticed. Let him execute his plan. Because now I knew what I was dealing with. This wasn't a temporary financial problem. This was a planned, deliberate robbery by someone who had spent weeks studying my routine and my vulnerabilities. Someone who was sleeping down the hall with my daughter. I turned out the lights in my bedroom and went through my normal evening routine. Every action felt performed for an invisible audience. Was Charlie listening? Did he know I had discovered his search? As I pulled back the covers, one thought crystallized in my mind. Tomorrow I would start collecting evidence. Tonight I would lie awake and plan. But first I needed to know exactly what I was dealing with. Sleep was impossible. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind replaying the evening's events. Every tiny sound made me tense up. The house settling, the wind outside the window, the faint hum of the refrigerator 2 floors below. At 11:47 p.m., according to my bedside clock, I heard movement downstairs. Soft footsteps crossed the living room floor. They weren't Lauren's light steps but something heavier, more deliberate. It was Charlie. I remained completely still, controlling my breathing, listening as the sounds moved toward the front of the house. Barely audible through the thin floor, I heard his voice. He was on the phone, speaking in a whisper, thinking no one could hear him. I carefully got out of bed, trying not to let the mattress creak. The hardwood floor was cold to my bare feet as I moved closer to the air vent that connected my bedroom to the living room below. Sometimes, sound would travel through the old ductwork in unexpected ways. Charlie's voice was clear now. He was telling whoever he was talking to that I was definitely loaded, and that he had found the bank statements, the investment portfolios, and the whole shebang. He said there was serious money involved. My blood ran cold. The word "we" hung in the air. He wasn't working alone. He went on to explain that Lauren would be at her book club tomorrow night, giving them the perfect time. I grabbed my phone from the nightstand, my hands trembling as I opened the voice recording app. No matter what, I needed proof. Then he said he already had the key to the safe and that he took it earlier in the day when we were at dinner. He called me an old fool and said I kept all the important stuff there, including cash, jewelry, and other bank information. The bastard. I hit record as his voice became more animated and confident. He explained that he knew they were worried about the timing, but his gambling debts weren't going away. He said the guys he owed money to weren't too patient and that it had to happen now. Gambling debts. It all made sense. The desperation, the calculated approach, the willingness to betray my daughter's trust. Charlie wasn't just a thief, but a desperate man, cornered by his own recklessness. There was contempt in Charlie's voice now as he said I was just a lonely old widower who was probably grateful for the company and had no idea what was coming. He even said I practically handed him the information myself by asking about the house security at dinner. A rage started to build in my chest. The casualness in his voice, the way he reduced me to a stereotype, an easy target. But I forced myself to stay silent and keep recording. He said the beauty of his plan was that I would never suspect family. He even said that even if I realized something was gone, Lauren would convince me that I just misplaced something. I was 66, not 96. My memory was sharp enough to remember every word of this conversation. He said to his accomplice to trust him and that they would be in the clear by Thursday. He would tell Lauren they were offered a job in another state, something urgent, and that they would be gone before I even realized I had been robbed. He paused, listening to whoever was on the other end of the line, then laughed. He said maybe I should have been more careful about who I let into my home. The call ended. I heard Charlie move around for another minute downstairs, likely checking the locks, and then his footsteps on the stairs, careful and quiet. I quickly stopped the recording and slid my phone under my pillow. The bedroom door was still slightly ajar from his previous search. I didn't dare close it and reveal that I had noticed. Through the sliver, I watched his shadow pass by in the hallway. The guest room door opened and closed softly. For a long time after, I lay in the darkness, processing what I had learned. Charlie had gambling debts serious enough to bring in dangerous people. He had an accomplice. He planned to rob me tonight during Lauren's book club and disappear immediately afterward, dragging my daughter into a web of debt and deceit. The violation of my bedroom now seemed minor compared to this larger betrayal. Charlie wasn't just stealing from me. He was using Lauren as a shield, manipulating her love and trust to set up his crime. But he had made one catastrophic mistake. He believed I was helpless and stupid, just another easy mark. He had no idea that I had spent 30 years as an insurance investigator before I retired and that I had dealt with a lot of desperate people who tried to outsmart the system. Charlie wanted to play games with an old man. Well, let's see how smart he really was. I woke at 6:30 a.m., as I always did. The recording on my phone felt like a nightmare, but the timestamp proved it wasn't. Charlie's voice was clear as day, planning to rob me tonight. Downstairs, I made coffee and started on my usual breakfast of eggs, toast, and orange juice. Everything was the same as it had been for the last 3 weeks. When Lauren appeared in her robe, yawning and full of gratitude, I smiled warmly. She said she had slept like a baby and thanked me for letting them stay. Charlie appeared 20 minutes later, his hair still damp from the shower. He looked rested and confident, like a man with a plan. He said it was a beautiful morning and asked what everyone's plans were for the day. I carefully placed his coffee down and said that I had the usual to do and that I might run some errands later. Charlie's eyes sharpened slightly as he asked what I had planned exactly. I told him just odds and ends, maybe to the hardware store or to the bank. I watched his reaction. A small muscle near his left eye twitched. I told him nothing exciting. Charlie leaned forward and asked if everything was all right financially. Lauren laughed, saying I had always been paranoid about checking my accounts in person. I gently corrected her, saying I wasn't paranoid but just careful. Charlie nodded a little too approvingly, saying I was absolutely right and that it was a real jungle out there for a man my age with all the identity theft and online scams. And there it was again, a man my age. The casual contempt wrapped in fake concern. Charlie continued, saying that he had been thinking about my home security and that my neighborhood seemed pretty quiet. Lauren chimed in, saying it was perfectly safe since I had lived there for 15 years with no issues. But Charlie wasn't listening to his wife. He kept his attention on me, saying that a man living alone with valuables in the house should be prepared. Then he asked if I kept important documents in the safe upstairs. I took a slow sip of coffee, considering my answer. I told him I kept some things in the safe and then he asked about cash. He said it was smart to have emergency funds on hand in case the banks went down or something happened. His audacity was incredible. He was sitting at my breakfast table, eating food I had made, and asking me to list my assets for his convenience. I simply said I had everything I needed, Charlie then tried a different approach. He said he heard that I was a heavy sleeper and that was a good thing because he worried about older people not getting a good night's rest. I had not mentioned anything of the sort, but I nodded anyway. I confirmed that when I was out, I was dead to the world, and that lately I had been so tired in the evenings. Charlie's posture visibly relaxed. I wanted him to think I would be unconscious and helpless tonight. I told them that I needed to let them get on with their day, and that I would probably be going to bed early tonight because all the family activity had worn me out more than usual. Lauren said that was a great idea and that I deserved the rest. Charlie helped carry the plates into the kitchen, and I caught him glancing toward the stairs and my bedroom, where he was calculating and planning. He casually said he might stay up tonight and watch television in the living room because he was a bit of a night owl. Of course, he was. I smiled and nodded, telling him to make himself at home and that the remote was on the coffee table. After breakfast, Charlie announced that he had some work calls to make, and Lauren decided to organize their things in the guest room. I had my window. I told them I would go run those errands now and that they should enjoy their quiet time together. As I pulled out of the driveway, I saw Charlie watching from my bedroom window, not the guest room. My hands tightened on the steering wheel, and I thought that tonight couldn't come soon enough. The hardware store was my first stop. I needed supplies, but more importantly, I needed to think through every detail of what was coming. Charlie had made his intentions clear at breakfast. He planned to enter my bedroom, find the key he had spotted weeks ago, and open my safe while I was supposedly sound asleep on medication. It was a simple and clean plan, a perfect crime against a trusting old man, except the key wasn't there anymore. I had moved it at 5 in the morning after a sleepless night after Charlie's phone call. The little brass key was now safely tucked away in a junk drawer in my kitchen, buried under rubber bands and twisted wires. Charlie could search my dresser until his fingers bled, but he wouldn't find a thing. But that wasn't enough for me. I wanted him to be caught red-handed, humiliated, and exposed for exactly what he was. I wanted proof so obvious that even Lauren couldn't deny the true nature of her husband. In the party supply aisle, I found what I needed, a small confetti popper. It was the kind they used for gender reveals, spring-loaded and designed to make a maximum mess with minimal effort. It was perfect. I also bought a bag of ultrafine silver and gold glitter, the kind that sticks to everything and never washes away. If Charlie wanted to be a thief, I thought he should look the part. When I got back home, the house was empty. There was a note on the kitchen counter from Lauren, saying she and Charlie had gone grocery shopping and would be back by 2 p.m. It was the perfect timing. I had 3 hours. In my basement workshop, I carefully took the confetti popper apart. The mechanism was very simple. A spring-loaded plunger that would activate when enough pressure was applied to it. I replaced the harmless paper confetti with my mixture of glitter, adding just enough to completely coat a person without causing injury. The hardest part was the calibration. The device had to be sensitive enough to go off when Charlie opened my drawer and reached his hand inside, but not from a casual touch. After a few tests with a wooden spoon, I found the right sensitivity. The setup required precision. I positioned the modified popper inside my dresser drawer, arranging it so that the mechanism would be triggered when someone reached to the back, where the key had been hidden. To anyone just looking inside, it would appear to be a normal drawer of old photos, buttons, and miscellaneous bits and bobs. But if you reached in with a purpose, you would be in for a surprise. I tested the setup 3 times with a ruler to simulate Charlie's movement. Each test worked perfectly, sending a cloud of glitter exactly where an intruder's face and hands would be. The device was easily reset, ready for its real performance. Next was the fake key. I positioned a fake key in a visible spot near the front of the drawer. It was an old suitcase key that looked similar enough to fool someone in a hurry. Charlie would spot it right away, confidently reach for it, and activate my surprise. The beauty was in the psychology. Charlie expected secrecy, silence, and success. He was planning a quick, quiet theft, not a glitter explosion that would mark him as clearly as a die pack marks a bank robber. By 1:45 p.m., everything was in place. The drawer looked innocent and normal. The trap was armed and ready. Tonight, Charlie would enter my bedroom, expecting to find a helpless victim. Instead, he would find justice. I heard car doors slamming in the driveway and knew that Lauren and Charlie were returning. They were likely feeling comfortable. Charlie had no idea that his crime scene had become a trap. I carefully closed the dresser drawer and went downstairs to meet them with my best grandpa smile. I knew tonight would be very interesting. After dinner, I announced that I had a quick errand to run and that I wouldn't be long. Lauren looked up from unpacking groceries and asked if I needed any help. I told her I was just going to pick something up at the electronics store and to just relax because they had done enough shopping for the day. Charlie barely looked up from his phone, but I noticed a spark of interest in his eyes. An old man running an errand by himself and leaving the house unattended likely validated his mental map of my daily routine. The salesman, a friendly young man named Marcus, didn't even bat an eye when I told him I needed a security camera for my bedroom. He asked if there were a lot of robberies in my area. I simply said, "Something like that." I told him that I needed a small one with good night vision and that it had to be wireless. Marcus showed me a few options, and I settled on a compact model that connected to my smartphone with motion detection and had an 8-hour battery life. The camera was smaller than a deck of cards and had a magnetic mount. Marcus advised that I would need to check its positioning, and that the app would allow me to see exactly what the camera saw in real time. It was perfect. I paid with cash and drove home, the camera sitting in its box next to me like a secret weapon. When I got back to the house, I found Charlie and Lauren watching television in the living room. They looked cozy, like a normal couple staying at Lauren's father's house, not like a pair of thieves getting ready for a heist. I told them that I was going to go rest for a few minutes since all the running around had tired me out and headed upstairs. In my bedroom, I closed the door and got to work. The camera had to capture Charlie approaching the dresser, his reaction to opening the drawer, and the glitter explosion that would follow, but it also had to remain completely hidden. I used the smartphone app to check a few positions. The angle was wrong from my bookshelf, and it was too obvious behind my lamp. Finally, I found the perfect spot. I nestled it in between books on my nightstand, angling it so that it would capture both the dresser and the center of the room. The magnetic mount held perfectly, and the camera's black body blended in with the spines of the books. It was invisible unless someone was specifically looking for surveillance equipment. I spent 20 minutes fine-tuning the angle via the app, ensuring optimal coverage. The motion detection was sensitive enough to activate when someone entered the room, but not so sensitive that normal settling or outside noise would cause false triggers. The battery life was crucial. The camera had to last from that moment until Charlie made his move, maybe 8 to 10 hours. I switched it to motion-activated mode to conserve power and then checked the night vision by turning out the lights. The infrared image was crystal clear. Charlie's face would be perfectly visible when he triggered my trap. I also checked the recording feature, making sure the audio was clear enough to capture any words Charlie might say during his crime. If he said anything that would incriminate himself, which desperate people often do, I would have that evidence. The setup was elegant in its simplicity. Charlie would enter my room expecting darkness and silence, but instead, he would be filmed from the moment he stepped over the threshold. The camera would capture his search, his discovery of the fake key, his reach for the drawer, and the spectacular glitter explosion that would follow. I would have visual proof, audio proof, and physical proof, all in one beautiful package. I rearranged a few books to better conceal the camera, and then stepped back to admire my work. Everything looked normal, innocent, just an old man's bedroom, ready for a peaceful night. Downstairs, I could hear Lauren and Charlie talking quietly, no doubt planning their evening. Charlie was likely counting down the hours until his window for theft would open. He had no idea that window had become a trap. I checked my phone one last time. The camera showed a clear image, the recording feature was active, and the battery showed a full charge. Everything was ready. Tonight, Charlie would finally show his true colors, and thanks to modern technology, every moment would be preserved in a perfect record. Let the games begin. Dinner passed quietly. Lauren talked about changes in the neighborhood while Charlie checked his phone frequently. I played my part of the tired grandfather to perfection, ready to go to bed early after a long day. By 8 in the evening, we were in the living room. Lauren was curled up with a book, and I was in my usual chair, pretending to rub my temples. I mumbled that it had been a long day and that I would likely turn in early. Charlie immediately looked up from his phone. He said he had hoped we would have a drink first, to spend some time together as a father-in-law and son-in-law. The offer came out of nowhere, but his tone was deliberately casual, almost too casual. Lauren said it was sweet and that we should spend more time together. Charlie went on to say that he had been thinking about the bottle of Macallan he had seen in my kitchen and that it was a premium drink, perfect for a nightcap. I kept my expression neutral, but internally I was intrigued. Charlie had likely been planning this conversation since breakfast. The timing, the offer, and the specific mention of expensive scotch were all deliberate. Nothing was accidental. I told him I appreciated his thoughts, but that I was on medication that didn't mix with alcohol. Charlie's smile tightened slightly. He insisted that one small glass wouldn't hurt, since we were practically family. I told him I really had to avoid it altogether. Lauren chimed in, saying I was right because my doctor had been very specific about my blood pressure medication. But Charlie wasn't giving up easily. Then he asked if we would at least have a toast. He paused, looking for something to toast to, and said, "To family." His insistence was very telling. A normal person would have graciously accepted my first refusal. Charlie was persistent because he needed me to have something specific to drink, something that would ensure my deep sleep tonight. I carefully stood up and said that I was more tired than I thought and that I was going to take one of those sleeping pills and call it a night. Charlie's expression immediately changed. I told him the doctor prescribed them last month and that they were powerful and knocked me out completely, and that I would be dead to the world until the morning. A look of relief washed over Charlie's face. He said that sounded great and that I needed the rest. Lauren kissed me on the cheek and said sweet dreams and that she would see me in the morning. I made a show of walking slowly up the stairs, pausing to grab the handrail like an old man struggling with fatigue. At the top, I turned back and told them not to stay up too late. I also told Charlie to help himself to anything he wanted in the kitchen. He thanked me and wished me a good night's sleep. In my bedroom, I pretended to get ready for bed, changing, brushing my teeth, and settling into bed. But I also double-checked the camera's positioning and confirmed the glitter trap was ready. I turned out the lights in the bedroom and settled into bed, still fully dressed, positioned to see the hallway through the slightly ajar door. Downstairs, I could hear the television on low, and Charlie and Lauren whispering. Then Lauren's footsteps on the stairs and the guest room door closing. Charlie stayed downstairs, likely watching the clock and calculating how long it would take for my sleeping pill to fully take effect. I checked my phone. It was 9:47 p.m. The camera showed my empty bedroom in perfect night vision. The trap was set. The stage was prepared. All I had to do was wait for my son-in-law to reveal his true colors. At 2:43 a.m., I heard the first creak on the stairs. I had lain motionless for hours, positioned so I could see the hallway through the slightly ajar door. On my phone, the camera showed my empty bedroom in perfect night vision, waiting. Charlie moved like a professional burglar, avoiding the spots on the stairs that groaned under weight. He had studied all the idiosyncrasies of my house during his 3-week stay, mapping out every sound that could betray his presence. A floorboard in the hallway near my room whispered under his weight, and then silence. He was listening, making sure his sleeping pill story had worked. I controlled my breathing, making it deep and even. It was the most important performance of my life, with my daughter's future at stake. The handle on my door turned with glacial slowness. Charlie's silhouette appeared in the doorway, backlit by the faint night light from the hallway. He froze for 30 seconds, watching my supposedly unconscious form. Convinced I was deep under the sleeping pills, he slipped inside. Charlie moved with a predator's confidence now, believing himself invisible and untouchable. His dark clothing made him almost disappear, but I could track his movements by sound and shifting shadows. He approached my dresser with the certainty of a man who had planned every step. 3 weeks of observation had taught him exactly where to find what he needed. The key that would open my safe, my security, my savings. I watched him position himself directly in front of the dresser. His hands reached for the second drawer, the one that held my hidden key and his spectacular surprise. The drawer slid out smoothly. For a fraction of a second, Charlie's posture radiated triumph. He had found his target, confidently reaching his hand inside, his fingers searching for the brass key that would solve all his problems. Then my confetti popper exploded. Boom! The sound was magnificent, like a festive firecracker crossed with a small cannon. A glorious cloud of silver and gold glitter erupted, coating Charlie from head to toe. The blast echoed through the house like a celebratory salute. Charlie stumbled backward, cursing loudly as the glitter clung to his hair, his clothes, and all over his shocked face. He looked like he had been attacked by a craft store, transformed into a walking disco ball. "What the hell?" he gasped, desperately trying to brush off the glitter that was stuck to everything. I performed my awakening with an Oscar-worthy precision, sitting up with a look of startled confusion. "What was that?" I cried, reaching for my bedside lamp. "What was that noise?" The room was flooded with light, revealing Charlie in all his shimmering glory. He stood frozen near my dresser, covered from head to toe in festive confetti, clutching the fake key I had planted as a decoy. "Charlie?" I blinked with theatrical astonishment. "What are you doing in my bedroom?" He opened his mouth, closed it, and opened it again. Glitter rained from his hair like a festive snow. I heard a noise," he stammered. "I thought someone might be breaking in." "Breaking in?" I looked around my room with feigned confusion. "And you became glittery?" Charlie looked down at himself, finally realizing the full extent of his transformation. He resembled a rejected Christmas ornament. "There was some kind of trap," he said weakly. "A trap?" I tilted my head innocently. "In my bedroom?" From the hallway came the sound of running footsteps. Lauren, woken by the blast, was hurrying to see what had happened. Charlie's eyes widened with panic. "How do you explain being covered in craft supplies while robbing your father-in-law at 3 in the morning? When Lauren appeared in the doorway, her eyes immediately went to Charlie, standing by the dresser, covered in glitter. Confusion and then concern were written on her face. She asked him why he looked like that and what he was doing in my bedroom. Charlie tried to concoct a clumsy story about coming to check on me, and how some security device went off when he opened a drawer. Lauren looked at me in disbelief, asking if I really had such elaborate traps in my furniture. I responded with feigned confusion, saying I knew nothing about it, and then her questions to Charlie became sharper. My daughter insisted on knowing why he was looking for medication in my dresser drawer when he knew they were always in the bathroom. Charlie fumbled for excuses, but his story was falling apart. As he began to get angry and accuse her of interrogating him, I saw the last vestiges of her trust in him disappear. I decided to end it. Reaching for my phone, I told Lauren she needed to hear something. Charlie panicked, but Lauren, on high alert, told me to play the recording. The room was filled with Charlie's voice, as he cold-bloodedly discussed my finances, calling me an old fool, and explaining his plan to rob me. He talked about his gambling debts, his plan to use Lauren's book club as a cover, and even how he was going to make her believe I was losing my memory to cover up his crime. As she listened, Lauren's face turned pale, then grim. Tears ran down her cheeks, but I didn't see sadness, only anger. She was stunned to learn about his lies, his debts, and his betrayal. When the recording ended, she gathered her strength and, without hesitation, told him to leave her home. Charlie tried to threaten her with a court battle, but she retorted that his debts were much larger than anything he could ever get. He tried one last time to blame me, but Lauren calmly and firmly said that he had done this to himself when he chose to rob her family instead of asking for help. Left speechless, he quickly packed his things and drove away. Lauren and I sat in silence for some time. Then she looked at me with pain in her eyes and apologized. I hugged her and told her that she was not at fault. When she complimented my glitter bomb, her sadness receded for a moment, and she gave a small smile. She asked if she could stay with me, and I reassured her that this home would always be her home. 3 months later, Lauren was divorced, working at the local library, and exuding a newfound peace. She thanked me for protecting her and handling everything so elegantly. I replied that she was a woman of her own, and that she also did the right thing when she heard the truth. She later texted me, saying that my fame as an innovator in home security methods had already spread. And I thought that maybe I should patent my invention. Life has returned to normal. My home is quiet and peaceful again, free from the lies and tension. Sometimes justice comes from courts and police. Sometimes it comes from trusting your instincts, setting traps, and letting people reveal their true nature. And sometimes justice glitters.